This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in
universes where things are upside and all around. And this month, you're telling us where to go. You're going to put the journey in front of us. Welcome to another exciting mailbag episode of Through the Looking Glass. I am your co-host, Scott Criscuolo. It is a great honor to be with you for the final episode of 2024. It's been a great year. We've had great episodes throughout since we started this show, and you can check the archive on placetobe.podbean.com, or, of course, all of your podcatchers, Apple and Spotify, etc. I think our last mailbag was, June. Was it June? I think it was June. So we're doing one tonight, and I got some doozies. But let me bring in, of course, I'm not going to talk to myself. I mean, I've done that, but I'm usually crazy. But this guy says he's melting. Melting. That's because he is the thunder and the lightning. The thunder from down under, Mr. Dave Hall. Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm very warm, Scott. Thank you for the welcome. Thank you to everyone joining us, and a very Merry Christmas season to all our listeners. Yes. I'm sure most of our listeners are probably rugging it up in front of fireplaces and blankets and really just trying to keep warm. While down here in Australia, it's by American temperature standards, it's 92 degrees today. And we're looking at a lovely Christmas day of about 80 to 85. So it's just a little bit warmer than we don't have snow and Frosty the Snowman, and forget about sleigh bells and all that. We just try to get the hose going and stay cool.
Dave, I can't even take you seriously. I can't even fucking take you. I cannot even take you seriously. Oh, my God. It's so crazy. Anyway, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and to all of you out there. I think this is one of the few years where I believe Christmas and Hanukkah overlap. It doesn't happen that often, but I got to talk to my many Jewish friends. I think Hanukkah and Christmas overlap this year. It doesn't always happen. Usually Hanukkah is a little earlier. But anyway, Dave, always a pleasure. You're my guy. And so just a little bit open the curtain, just a little. Normally, Dave is the research guy. Dave comes up with the awesome Dave and I together come up with the topics, but Dave finds a lot of the juicy stuff. I usually just do what I do best, yap endlessly, and edit and etc. But the mailbag episodes, usually I'm the one that has them. And for once, and I know, Dave, you are a research junkie and you love to prepare, but I got to be honest. For at least a couple of times a year, I like surprising you. I like you being off the cuff, and I think it's okay because you, our amazing listeners, love to throw us off the cuff. So I am going to do that. Dave and I are going to do that tonight. So we've got 10 questions that you listeners gave us, and we thank you for that. Thank you for your input and support. One of these is probably not a question more than it is a future show topic, Dave. And when I read it, I went, oh, this is going to be good. That one's going to be a meaty episode. I'm not going to lie. Whenever we do that episode, it's probably going to be a couple hours because we're going to have to go a little deep in the weeds. We're going to have to go a little deep in the weeds, but I'll let you know. So here we go, everybody. We got 10 questions. So we should hopefully get it done in a nice, neat and tidy. Dave and I could go off the rails. We'll see. It's fun. It'll be fun. We're going to have a good time.
All right. See if a tangents open up.
Oh yeah, tangents are always open. This is where if you're in for those of you in the alternate universes Through the Looking Glass, get out of the way because you're never going to know where Dave and I are going to run you over somewhere in the folds of time because we're not going to know where the hell we're going tonight. So all right, question number 1, Dave. All right, guys, love your show. With Brock Lesnar possibly never coming back and Goldberg possibly never coming back, I'd like to know, what if Goldberg and Brock Lesnar didn't leave after WrestleMania 20, and how would you book them, as briefly or as long as you'd like, through, say, 2010?
Wow. Oh,
that's a great question.
That is a good question.
Let's start with Brock. Because he might
Brock,
be a
I
little
think, is easy. Yes, I think Brock is definitely easier to do. I think it's absolutely clear as a bell. If Brock hadn't given his notice and said he was going to leave, I think he's the face of SmackDown for 10 years. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that.
Right.
I would actually suggest that if he hadn't given his notice, he wouldn't have dropped the belt to Eddie. And as much as I love Eddie in that time period, I really feel that Brock would probably have retained the title and gone on a bit of a longer run. I think we are probably looking at a man who dominates that title scene for, if he's there till 2010, he dominates the title scene. I think I think they build the persona that they end up getting to with Brock, the Invincible Beast. I think they would build into that, and they would allow him to dominate. I think we would have seen some great matches. I think we would have seen some fantastic matches with a developing Cena. We saw that not long after WrestleMania 20 is when Cena really sort of caught on with the fans, and his gimmick got him over, and he began his babyface turn later that year. So I think we would have seen another round of Lesnar versus Cena. I think we would have got a lot more Lesnar versus Kurt Angle matches. In fact, I'll tell you what, I think Lesnar and Kurt Angle would have been that almost the Dusty Ric Flair of the early 2000s, that time period. They would have just kept coming back to it over and over. So it's I think the impact of Brock staying though is we probably don't get the title runs of Eddie Guerrero. We probably don't see Edge rise to prominence, perhaps to certainly to the extent that he did. I also question. I think we definitely don't get the rise of JBL. I think JBL's probably. You know what? The biggest impact would be, I think JBL probably finds himself without a job. I think the JBL character saved Bradshaw's career. I think without heading down that line, look, they might have still done the JBL character, but not he wouldn't have got the push that he got. I also don't think we get the Rey Mysterio title reign, and which I don't think we would have got.
I agree with you.
Passed away anyway, but I think an interesting story. I think if they continued Eddie's character development that they did, which I see would have been the case, I think we would have had, you know what, I might be willing to change that. Eddie might have got a title run a little bit, maybe 12 months later. We might have got a brief run, but not to the main event level that he really got the opportunity. And I know his title reign wasn't long, but he really got to solidify himself as that upper, main event guy in the 12 months prior to his passing. The interesting battle, I think, would be whether or not Lesnar's stay hampers Batista's rise. I think Batista still gets his rise to the main event, but again, Batista's character really filled the void when he moved to SmackDown. Really filled the void of the missing Brock Lesnar, and they're very similar characters in the end of it. Like the man beast. I mean, Brock's obviously a little bit more, got that better amateur background, but I think that it would be interesting whether Batista. Yeah, one of Batista or Cena probably doesn't have the amount of success that they get if Brock stays.
Yeah, I agree with you on the JBL thing. I feel like they may have still changed him, and maybe Brock ends up turning. We're also assuming, and that Brock would probably stay a heel. He's a better heel anyway because he's just an asshole. But I mean, even watching him now, one of my chrono watches, I'm in 2003. And even in like the spring after he beat Brock at Kurt at WrestleMania 19, he still kind of acted like I'm waving the belt around. I won, yay! And I don't think he knew how to act like a face. It was very weird. I agree with you on the Rey Mysterio thing. I don't think because if Brock was there, then they would have probably figured something else out. And I don't think Rey would have ever won the title. I don't think that would have happened. Would Kurt have stayed? Maybe.
I think Kurt's issues were outside of that. I think that he probably would have still ended up having the need to leave. When you hear the circumstances around him leaving and needing to go to rehab, not wanting to, needing a break from the schedule, look, I think that would have happened either way. But it's I think that you might have got him back sooner. He might have been more willing to do a rehab run and return if Brock was still around, just for the fact that you get those ongoing series. But yeah, I don't know. I think in my mind, the immediate aftermath, you've got heel Brock. As I said, I think that if he's not leaving, he's got the title, and maybe he's defended the title against Goldberg at WrestleMania 20. Maybe not. I think they wanted to head in that direction either way. So I think Brock Goldberg would have been a match. Then I think you get Brock Eddie. You think you get Brock Eddie for a couple of pay-per-views straight after WrestleMania 20. Eddie at his peak as the cheetah gimmick, which would have been great to see. And I think then, Brock moves through, you got the influx of new guys. So he'll probably get a match against Booker, a match against RVD. You do the guys that come over. And then, as I said, I think it's really then the rise of Cena. Cena's rise to the top. And, maybe they put Cena over Brock at WrestleMania 21. Maybe that's their end game with Cena at that point. And you allow Brock to maybe have a 6-month break at that point, have a bit of a break, go home, have a recharge, and then come back around, sort of SummerSlam for his return, of which he might end up coming back as the baby face, but the monster, like he does in the 2020s. He's going to get cheered. He'll get to the point where he gets cheered. And so then you can bring him in and you can have him face a couple of heels without changing his character too much and not having to be the celebratory baby face, but have him be the monster who's just, battling the terrors. But yeah, I think that's probably your early trajectory.
All right. I like that idea. I like all that stuff. I do think eventually Brock would have got burned out and left anyway, but he probably would have left on better terms. And if he left until, let's say he leaves in 2010, he never would have come back in 2012 probably. Maybe he would have come back later in the decade, maybe like 2015 or 16 maybe. But I feel like eventually he would have got cooked. I still think he would have got burnt out, but I feel like he would have left on better terms.
I'll throw this out. I reckon it would be interesting if he stayed, if he goes to UFC with Vince's blessing, with the company's blessing. He goes in there to be the crossover, and then they can build, and then they can build him out. I mean, if he has, we saw that he had that success, and he would go in genuinely trying to make it. I think Brock still has the same success he had in UFC, and then comes back with that UFC status attached to him, and then you get a continuation of very similar to what we get. I think Brock goes with the company's blessing would be the big thing.
That's yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah, I agree. That's interesting. And then maybe he comes back later down the line. Okay. Goldberg, I think, is a little more problematic because I feel like Goldberg would be more suited for Raw. And I think eventually I think eventually he would have lost his patience like he did eventually. I just feel like he would have lost his patience with whether it was Vince or whether it was Triple H or someone like Punk or Jericho. Somebody would have pissed him off to the point where I think he would have left anyway.
Yeah,
I think that
I agree with that.
I think that if he had the money, if they had the money, I could easily see Goldberg going to TNA in like 2000. You know, when they did that uptick in 2007, 2008, 2009. Hell, if he was that irked at WWE, who's to say that Hogan doesn't approach him? And when they have this big spike with Bischoff in 2010, Goldberg doesn't go to TNA. So I think he would have had a couple of decent feuds, but I just feel like he would have, because unlike Brock, who I think understood the business aspect of the business, maybe not so much the work. Well, maybe to a certain extent because he was a good in-ring worker, but I think he learned the business eventually. Goldberg, I feel like, took a while before he figured out the whole equation.
Yeah.
So I feel like by 2007, 2008, when he's not the man anymore, and Vince is still pushing Batista and Cena and Orton, and then that he would have lost his patience with not being the man.
Absolutely. And I don't think it would even take that long. I mean, we know he'd been misbooked in his own. Look, I think even in the fans' minds, he'd been misbooked prior to WrestleMania 20, which is why he didn't want to stay. But if you look at, he'd already feuded with Triple H and essentially Evolution. So coming out of WrestleMania 20, if he's staying on Raw, what are you doing with him? You've had a match against Jericho already, so you can't really do that. So you're putting him against, Kane again. Well, he's already faced Kane. You're really needing to put him against guys that are on the up and coming stream. Is Hunter willing to let Brock have an extended run with the belt? I don't know. I think at that time period it's unlikely, and they probably would have been reliant on bringing a couple of guys over from SmackDown to maybe try and help, give Brock some opponents. And even then, there just aren't the guys at that level. Like maybe Edge's return from injury, that could create something. Edge could come back as a heel and face Brock. That would be interesting. And you've sort of got Edge's use of the spear and Brock and Goldberg, I should say, and Goldberg's spear. I think that becomes an interesting potential matchup. And then you've got Orton's rise to the main event. You probably get an extended Orton Goldberg matchup. In fact, it might even be beating Goldberg is his first step in the Legend Killer gimmick, or solidifying the Legend Killer gimmick. But I think the issue therein lies. Goldberg's not someone who wants to put over new guys and help build up new characters. That's not who he saw himself as. And I think he gets jack of the company. I don't see him lasting to 2010. It's that simple. I think you get
I don't either.
At best 12 more months out of him, and then he's in recycled feuds. And unless you move him over to SmackDown to battle with guys like Kurt and Brock, Goldberg is probably going to be sitting there going, look, this just isn't for me. You've got no one for me to face. I'll let my contract expire. It's not like you've got the guys that came through in that time period, 04, 05, 06. Benoit and Eddie were been around for a while and sort of got their lifetime achievement runs, essentially. The way I'd suggest it. You got the rise of Cena, Orton, and Batista, and those three guys are the big standouts from that time. But the rest of the guys that came up with them never really amounted to long-term main event status guys. They were mid-card guys. Yeah, your Carlitos, your Chris Masters, your you know, that sort of crew that all came up, Eugene and all that. They were always mid-card guys. And it's not until you get the rise of NXT that you really have the blood that comes through that can move into the main events. And Goldberg's not going to make it that far. They just didn't have people who could rise to a main event status quick enough to make it interesting for Goldberg. That's the danger I see.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on all those points. And I don't think he would have probably ever come back, and I'm sure he would have bashed Vince or something. I don't know. All right, well, thank you for that question. This one, I think we may have to be for another episode if we talk about either him or the show or the show brand. What if Ric Flair? I feel like we talked about this on a past. We might have talked about this in a past episode. If not, this might be good for a combo of something else. But somebody asked, what if Ric Flair showed up at SummerSlam 1988, which was obviously a giant rumor.
Yeah, I think we did sort of cover that a little bit in our when we did Flair and
yeah,
and
I think
Savage
we did
and all that. So
yeah, I think we did. I think you're right. Yep, that did sound familiar. So well, thank you for that question again.
As a recap, look, as a quick recap, because we've just mentioned it, if Flair arrived at SummerSlam 88, I think he goes straight into a feud with Savage. And I think I would argue the point that the Mega Powers breakup doesn't happen because I think Flair beats Savage for the belt to transition it back to Hogan at WrestleMania 5. And I think your main event at WrestleMania 5 is Flair Hogan. If Flair's in the company in 1988, that's the only direction you can do. He was at the absolute peak in-ring ability at that time. You can't do anything but put him to the top.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, that one's an easy one. Thank you for the question, though. That was the same guy that did the Goldberg question. This one I like. Guys, what if in an alternate universe, Tony Khan buys Ring of Honor and that's it? He does not start. There never exists AEW. Tony Khan just decides to buy Ring of Honor and work with that. What would happen in an alternate universe?
Look, I think it all comes down to timing. I mean, Ring of Honor had a real momentum flow in the few years prior to the formation of AEW, but I feel that they had already started to decline a little bit due to guys leaving the company in prior to AEW even forming, and that had a big hit. They really felt like they dropped in status in a couple of years. So if Tony Khan was to buy Ring of Honor and not fund AEW, I think they might have the ability to hang on to a couple of the indie guys at that time and probably build around them. But I'm not sure that the damage hadn't already been done from NXT. I mean, NXT had already started raiding, like they'd already raided Ring of Honor multiple times. They'd taken Seth Rollins, Kevin Steen, El Generico, like they'd already taken these guys years before. And the as a lot of people like to point out, that sort of NXT time period in the mid to late teens of the 20s prior to COVID was the rise of the indie darlings. Tommaso Ciampa goes there, Adam Cole goes there. That all these big name indie guys are flocking into NXT.
Right.
If Tony Khan had bought Ring of Honor prior to that influx, they might have been able to keep some of those guys from jumping.
Right.
And that could have been interesting to see, but I don't know that it really changes the game or the environment at all.
Yeah, here's my thing. Great question, by the way. Thank you. I always thought that Ring of Honor was kind of like the replacement for when we got to 2002, we had two new promotions. TNA replaced WCW, and Ring of Honor replaced ECW as that kind of gritty, not as violent, but gritty indie darling promotion that the up-and-comers would go to make a name for themselves. And I can't imagine, even if Tony bought Ring of Honor and tried to kind of cultivate it with capital and get it on a network, it still would have felt like Ring of Honor. A nice little promotion that would have been fun to watch, but would never have touched WWE.
Yep.
And that's fine, but TNA obviously is still, still alive, still kicking. Now we could expand that. What if Tony bought TNA? Well, that's I mean, that I don't know. I don't know how TNA would have been any different with it already being established. So that's interesting. But Ring of Honor has just always been branded as a indie promotion, a promotion for the darlings coming up through the ranks. So had he just bought that and moved on, I think it would have, if he could have got it on a network, maybe it might have made a little splash. But I agree with you. By the time that might have happened, NXT would have already taken all of the indie guys. So I agree with you 100%. I just don't think.
And all they're left with, all Ring of Honor would be left with, would be bringing in all the guys that AEW brought in. Your Okadas, all that sort of, the EVPs and all their crew. It would have been the same guys that come in that were the guys that AEW used to start up with. The only difference being whether or not someone like a Chris Jericho would want to go to Ring of Honor on leaving WWE. That might be
sure.
That might be the bigger hit. The impact there is that Tony might not have been able to bring in some of the bigger names that they did in the early days of AEW because there was probably the stigma that Ring of Honor is that up-and-coming developing promotion.
Right.
I mean, the big thing about Ring of Honor was it was the in-ring work company. And that's what AEW tried to, when they formed, that was their, basis of formation. We're going to be the in-ring workers. We're going to put on all the great matches. And that's what Ring of Honor had been known to do at an indie level. So, I think they just get the same guys that formed AEW at the beginning.
Yeah. Cody Rhodes,
Yeah.
And maybe the guys like obviously the Bucks and Kenny and that guy. Yeah, I think you're right. Great question. Thank you. All right. This one's an interesting one, but I feel like a mildly, maybe an easier answer. Guys, thank you for the great shows. My question is, in 2007, John Cena, of course, tore his pec muscle in October, came back like gangbusters just 3 months later at the 2008 Royal Rumble. But in an alternate universe, what if he never comes back? What if the tear is so severe he has to retire? What if John Cena is gone in October 2007? Let me throw out my theory and let me know what you think. I'll go first this time. I think, definitely we see a rise of Batista, because they both came out together in 2005, so they were both kind of what each new stud was on a show. I think Cena's gone, and you really strap like the face of the company rocket ship to Batista. I think you have to.
Yeah.
I think you put a lot more faith in Punk. And I don't think he gets treated like crap in 2008 or 2009 for that matter, even with the weird storyline with Jeff Hardy and the whole streets, the whole straight edge society thing. I think you push Punk into being the mega baby face to kind of be even with Batista in one sense, to that will fill that hole. So maybe they look through the indies and try to bring in a Brian Danielson a little earlier. And try to fill that babyface slot. So I think it's a crime. It's a shame that Cena would be gone, and I think I don't know if Randy Orton could fill that slot because he, again, like Brock, he's a good heel. I mean, I think he's a decent babyface, but I think he's a better heel. But to me, the short answer is I think you just push Batista even harder to be the face of the company instead of sharing the face of the company. And maybe Batista doesn't get into as many movies because he's needed more on a grander scale as the face of WWE throughout the late 2000s into the 2010s. And maybe he doesn't get Guardians of the Galaxy and et cetera, et cetera. So that's my take. I think the short answer for me, Dave, is that Batista kind of grabs the mantle even more than he did without having to share it with Cena. That's my take.
Yeah, I think that's the number one big key is that they had Batista there. And I've gone on record, I've said on this show before, when Batista and Cena were on the rise, I felt it was clear that Batista seemed to have the natural crowd attraction and the crowd seemed to be more behind him. But they did the switch of brands because I think the company saw Cena as, Vince saw him more as the face of the company, and Batista was the one who suffered. I think we've seen with his rise in Hollywood that Batista can be the face of things. He can be well spoken. He can represent well and do the talk show circuits and all that, which is what they wanted Cena doing. So I agree. I think Batista is struck back straight into the top spot. I believe what you probably get if Cena's ruled out of, as we said, 07, I think when we go into 08, you revamp the 08 Rumble. I think you have Batista win the Rumble, and probably they were building to, Orton and Triple H were feuding on the Raw side. I think you put the belt back on. You get Batista into the main event at WrestleMania, probably beating Edge. He beats Edge cleanly. I mean, we've seen that they have good chemistry. They have great matches. And I think you might even consider at some point building to, I think they might even look at building to perhaps a unification match. Like, what better way to really solidify Batista as your top guy than maybe for a brief period of time he beats Orton for the belt and unifies the two titles and goes on a little bit of a run where he can maybe appear on both brands for a period of time.
Right.
But I think Batista thing, I think Orton is the other. I mean, look, Orton, Batista, Cena, they all had prominent roles. I think the company has to lean on Orton a little bit more as well. They probably lean on him to be a little bit more of the the guy that can. He was always the guy you could slot in when you needed. That I think Orton gets a little bit more of that. Maybe they need to utilize him as a baby face a bit more. I'm not sure, but I think in the immediate aftermath in 07, I think, like I said, Batista probably takes the belt from Edge at WrestleMania. And then you look, he can have a couple of matches with you're probably sitting at a point, I think, in the initial aftermath, not a lot probably changes because Orton was feuding with Triple H. So Cena sort of slotted in and was sort of, bouncing around. But in 08 itself, there was a lot more to do with sort of Orton, and Triple H had his sort of run in that time period. So I just think a lot of 08 probably goes the way it did, but I agree with you. I think that they are probably going to need to bring someone up or get someone ready. I'm not sure they were ready to back Punk at that point. I think you're probably looking at them trying to perhaps develop the likes of the John Morrison or the Miz or someone like that, maybe get them through a little bit quicker than they had. But I think in 08, they're going to rely still on Edge, Batista, Orton, Triple H, and The Undertaker to carry the load. I think where it's felt is that 2 years later, Cena not coming back is going to be felt more in 2 years later when you need to move The Undertaker out of that main event picture and Edge's injuries start to mount up a little bit. You've got Triple H starts to, they need to transition him into the DX role to get him out of the main event picture so that other guys can thrive. That's when I think Batista is going to really be relied more heavily. And it's not much of a, I mean, look, 2008, 2009, 2010, it's a time period where anyone seems to have just been able to slot in. Like, you could just move those guys around because they didn't do anything of any note with anyone. The impact is the longer term feel. And
right
where I think you really, the longer term impact is when you start to see the rise of Daniel Bryan and CM Punk in 2011. Both of them, their reputations in the WWF were built on their victories over John Cena. Money in the Bank, Punk versus Cena. Punk couldn't have, they were the development that they'd had of Cena being the face of the company for so long made that victory important. And then the next year when they did the thing with Daniel Bryan, it was the same idea. It was that Daniel Bryan, you've got these guys that are walking in the face of the company. John Cena being the in-ring face and Triple H being the branded face. I don't know that Batista could pull off what Cena can in the ring from an in-ring perspective. So they might have had to rely on Orton to do that. It might have been Orton that has to be the guy that helps elevate CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, and that your generation there that come through to take the mantle as the in-ring workers in 2011, 2012, 2013 when the company had that transition. The impact might have been that maybe Cody gets a better push earlier in his career and he doesn't need to leave the company.
That's possible, sure.
Because Orton being in a prominent role is able to help him more and help elevate him without him having to leave. So that's, I think in the end, it's going to be Orton that's going to be relied on to do the in-ring work to elevate guys. And in the immediate aftermath, Batista is the face who does the media coverage and the media push. But the impact of that is he probably still gets noticed by Hollywood.
True. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. Great question, everybody. Next up, this one I think is an easier answer than you think, for me anyway. So, what if Shawn Michaels did leave, because this was rumored, did leave for WCW in 1997 and joined the NWO, And Vince kept Brett. Now, we did do an episode where we talked about Brett staying. We did do that. We didn't really get into Shawn leaving. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think he would have lasted. For two reasons. Number one, I think he's still, yes, his boys were there, Hall and Nash, but number one, I think he had obviously substance issues, which I think without the love and the support of WWF would have just gone unchecked. And B, I don't think Hogan would have only given him so much.
Yeah.
So I got to be honest. I think he lasts maybe a year, and then I think Bischoff fires him. That's my take. I just don't think he wouldn't have gotten the bandwidth to be that Shawn Michaels like he did in WWF. I think Vince gave him a little more rope to hang himself than Bischoff would have. Bischoff didn't have any loyalty to Shawn. Vince, as much of a pain in the ass as Shawn was at that time, kind of had a soft spot for him. He'd been with the company almost 10 years at that point. I don't think Eric Bischoff would have given a shit. If he was pissing him off and making life difficult, he'd have cut him loose.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Vince, it might not have ended well for Shawn. Who knows what would have happened if he couldn't make it in WCW. I mean, would he have gone to ECW? I don't know if he'd have been that broke, but I don't know if he would have done that. Maybe, but I doubt it. I think, unfortunately, in the long run, the better choice was Brett going there. Unfortunately, of course, what they did to Brett was no better, but I just couldn't imagine the higher ups in WCW, whether it's Bischoff or whether it's Dave, the Turner people putting up with his crap, because he would not have acted any differently. I'm sorry, he wouldn't have. He wouldn't have acted any differently in WCW than he did in the WWF. That's just my take. What do you think?
Look, from an overall picture, I think you are right. I think without Vince and the WWF machine around him to try and help support him through his issues, I think he would have spiraled. Look, by the end of 98, 98, well, not even that. By the end of early 98, he's out injured anyway. So his back goes. So if we took him over, let's just play this out for me. Let me play this out. So the whole Shawn leaving was just around the time of King of the Ring, because he got in the backstage fight with Brett.
The Sunny Days and all that.
The Sunny Days promo. So it's in that sort of July time period. So let's say he gets his release. Vince lets him go, and he goes to WCW. In the beginning of August, Luger beats Hogan for the title on Nitro, and then the following week on pay-per-view, Hogan wins it back. I see that's how you debut Shawn. Shawn appears in the company at that pay-per-view. I think it was Road Wild. He appears in WCW, super kicks Luger in the main event when he's going for the rack while the ref's down, and Hogan gets the win, and Shawn joins the NWO. We know he's going to join the NWO because Hall and Nash are there. So I think that's his introduction. That's how you bring him into WCW. And for the first couple of months, it really is, he just basically fills in with Nash and Hall. They're probably going to do a bunch of tag team matches. Shawn is probably going to have matches against, the upper level. He'll probably go into a feud with Luger. He's cost Luger the belt, so he goes into a feud with Luger. Then you probably have him involved in War Games. I mean, hell, can you imagine War Games? Sure. 1997, Hall, Nash, Michaels, and X-Pac. Well, 6 at the time in War Games against, I think 97's War Games was the Horsemen, wasn't it?
Right, the one where Mr. Perfect turned. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you get that. I think you just slot Michaels into that match. And so essentially Michaels is probably feuds a little bit with the Horsemen, Flair and Arn, and you get some great matches there. You get some good matches. Then you have you come to around Starrcade, and by this point, Shawn is probably going to be doing two things. Number one, he's going to want elevation. He doesn't want to be playing second fiddle. And number two, Kevin and Scott are probably working hard to keep him sober and keep him straight. So you've got a couple of things going there. So I think when you come to that time period, I see Shawn probably taking the spot of Eric Bischoff or Scott Hall, probably having the match against Larry Zbyszko for because Shawn can work with anyone. He needs to be working with someone off the main event, but maybe even you have him against the Giant. Maybe it's beats the Giant. It's a number one contenders match. In fact, I'll go back a step. Shawn probably wins World War III. He wins the World War III pay-per-view, 60-man battle royal, to be named number one contender, so that after Starrcade, when Sting beats Hogan, you've got it lined up that Shawn faces Sting. And really, you come back to, would Eric Bischoff feel that he needs to pull the power move and not and play and give into Hogan's shenanigans with, I don't want to put Sting over, he hasn't tanned himself enough or whatever at Starrcade. Do we get the clean win, which would then allow Shawn and Sting to have, the next match for the title? That I think you hit that point, and then it really probably spirals out of control for Shawn. I mean, he's publicly acknowledged that by early '98 his drug use was out of control. Yeah, and I think you get through a number one contenders match, and then you probably see that they would want to start the building or the building blocks for the breakdown of the NWO into the Wolfpack Hollywood contingents. I think the plan would have been for Shawn to be a prominent featured role in that. But I agree with you. I think his demons flare up, and I think Eric would not be willing to put up with it. And on top of that, would see it as an opportunity to try and weaken the power of the Wolfpack. And the same way that he let X-Pac fires X-Pac, I could see he fires Shawn.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And then, Shawn really needs to battle the demons, and without the injury, would he be able to? Without the neck injury, would he really be in a position to let his body heal and let his body recover the way it was able to? And even then, he still battled his demons right through 98 and into 99. Yeah. So, yeah, that's how I see it working. But I agree with you. I think in the long run, he gets fired. I don't think, and because the bigger influence there is also you've got him around Scott Hall, and Scott couldn't control his substance issues, even with Kevin Nash there with him. And I think Scott Hall and Shawn Michaels would just egg each other on. And unfortunately, I think Shawn Michaels' career, we may have seen him fall into the realms of perhaps an overdose or something terrible, and maybe we lose him altogether.
Yeah, that would have been very sad. But I do think that there would have been some kind of power play with Hogan, and I definitely think so. But yeah, that would have been interesting. That would have been very interesting to see if that was the case. And as for Brett being in WWF, we already did a whole episode on that, so we don't have to do that. Great question. Thank you. This is a fun one because we did an episode. We did an episode about this kind of question, but with a different promotion. So, this could be one we do down the line. Maybe we did it already. I don't think we did, but great show, guys. I don't think you've covered this before, but you did an episode where WCW continued on in 2001 What if ECW hadn't closed in 2001? Would they have gotten on a network, and how could they have kept going?
I think that we haven't done that. I think that's a very interesting question, and I think it really ties into where the business was at that time, and I think the big key is I would hope that Heyman would see that the extreme level, the violence that they'd taken it to with the Ravens and the Sandmans and the Jerry Lynns and the RVDs, that they needed to change direction. And I think what we would have seen is, I think he wouldn't have been able to afford to bring in the top level talent. We wouldn't have seen Sting and Goldberg go there. It just wouldn't have happened. Heyman didn't have the money. He would have needed to rely on some of the younger guys. And I think what you see him bringing in the likes of Christopher Daniels and AJ Styles and that crew that probably formed a little bit of the basis of the foundation of TNA. Right. I think you see that Heyman, and I've heard an interview that Heyman where he said that his next project was going to be bringing in Christopher Daniels and building and sort of that was sort of the guy he was targeting. If the company had stayed, he was going to try and bring in Christopher Daniels and build around him a little bit. The Fallen Angel gimmick. I think that's where you see it go, and I think you see a little bit less of the extreme violence, the chair shots and the barbed wire, and I think you move into
that's what I was going to bring up.
You move into the Ring of Honor style in-ring product. So I think where they go, I think Rob Van Dam is going to be. I think he would get the world title on Rob Van Dam. He'd been building to it.
Yeah,
Rob Van Dam becomes his key player. And you've got Jerry Lynn there at the end. So I think Lynn and Van Dam sort of culminate their feud over the world title. And then you're bringing in, I think Christopher Daniels is one of the first guys that's going to be brought in, and you're going to build him up at that same time so that he becomes a guy. I think in the Fallen Angel character, I think Heyman saw a lot of potential for similarities to Raven, the mind games, the cult persona, the guy who could lead a cult type group, and so I think he would look at that's why I think he had his eye on Christopher Daniels, and that's what I think he would look to do. He'd bring him in. ECW is always known for having the smaller workers, so bringing in Christopher Daniels and building around him, probably to take over from RVD, because RVD is going to get poached. He's going to get picked up by WWE totally. Eventually.
Yep.
So I think 2001 RVD gets his world title reign, and while he's doing that, Heyman is building that next generation. I don't see him bringing in the power plant guys from WCW. That again, they're not the sort of guys that Heyman likes. Heyman likes guys with some more well-rounded workers. So like I said, I think you get your AJ Styles. He might bring in a Chavo. He might bring in a couple. Maybe he brings in a Billy Kidman. If he's got. In fact, Kidman would be. I could see him bringing Kidman in. And linking Kidman back up with Raven for a little while and building, Kidman could be someone that RVD could have had a bit of a feud with as well. And Kidman sort of plays that Jerry Lynn, Chris Candido, Lance Storm style role, like the second or third tier player who's good in ring, can build some feuds with, maybe even make Kidman a bit of a heel. And then, sort of that's I think the early stages. You bring in a couple of those good in ring workers out of WCW, but he's not going to target the higher end guys. And then he's building the underneath the as I said, He's going to bring in AJ Styles. I think one of the guys who would get an early in a call from him would be CM Punk. I think we would see CM Punk in ECW in probably, 02, 03. And in fact, that would probably be the next project. I see that bringing in the whole lot, Punk, Colt Cabana, that crew come in as well, and I worked with. The one person that I think he might get his hands on in sort of 2002, 2003 would be Jeff Hardy. Hardy's, issues with his demons in WWF that led to him leaving. I could see Heyman getting on the phone. Why don't you come in? Let's see what we can do. Do you want to talk about it? I'll give you the mic. And so that's what I think Heyman is going to build. He's going to build a company that really, we don't see Ring of Honor because we get the in-ring Extreme product out of Heyman in 01, 02. That's the basis. And you know what? With that, he might get a little bit more of a strength and be able to build a product that lasts a little bit longer.
Here's my thing about the last. Great analysis, by the way, Dave. A great answer. Here's my thing about the lasting. I concur that I think ECW would still have had a vision, a big vision. But I have to admit, you're right. I think you kind of actually kept it going. Here's my thing. You even said, you took the thought right out of my head when I wrote it down. Eventually, I'm going to say by like 2005, 2006, the next crop of young indie workers were not going to fucking wrestle barbed wire in their crotch and set themselves on fire and do Axel Rotten, dipping your taped fists into glass. Like that kind of shit, that kind of stuff. I don't think that next wave of indie wrestlers coming up AJ Styles was not gonna wrestle barbed wire matches. I'm sorry, he was not doing it. Daniel Bryan, Brian Danielson, all these guys that were coming up in the mid 2000s, late 2000s, were not going to wrestle like that anymore. So, I agree with you. You were actually more positive than I was. You thought that ECW would evolve and become a Ring of Honor. I thought they would just close eventually anyway, but they would have lasted probably another 4 or 5 years before they realized that no one wants to, get hit in the face with a frying pan or get a hockey stick shoved in their nuts or whatever. Like, I just don't. That next wave of young indie workers wanted to wrestle like the guys in Ring of Honor. They wanted to work very athletically in the ring, flipping and flopping, doing all their big moves, and wrestle like that. They weren't going to want to set themselves on fire and get hit in the face with a cookie sheet and stuff like that. I just don't think that was going to happen anymore.
I think the thing we forget about with Heyman is that when ECW was on its rise in 94, 95, 96, on multiple occasions, Heyman was trying to build those differences. He brought in, we know it's well known, Benoit, Eddie, Dean Malenko, Too Cold Scorpio, these in-ring workers, Shane Douglas. He wanted that style of in-ring product. Those guys kept getting stolen, or getting, to use Heyman's term, they would get stolen. They would get poached by WCW or WWE. Then he tried to use the Luchas. They got taken by WCW. So I think what he was left with was the extreme brand. The violent side of it was really all that was left, because everyone else kept leaving and those guys didn't, because they weren't going to get picked up. So I think when you get to 01, those guys are at the tail end of their careers. Injuries have mounted up. They can't stay healthy. They're not going to stay in the ring. And the next generation of in-ring guys are there to be used. Heyman was well known to want to develop and want to be at the forefront of change in the business. That's what he tried to do. I think he got hampered by guys going elsewhere for better paydays. and he couldn't pay them. So the younger workers in 01, 02, 03 who aren't going to get paid yet for a while, and without a second destination to go to, when you're fully relying on WWE being the case because WCW has shut, they've got nowhere else to go. Right. They've got a national stage. I think Heyman would pounce on them, and I think he would evolve his product accordingly.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. So I do think ECW might have evolved into something a little different, because I just don't think he could have maintained the hardcore aspect of things, and I also think the fans might have grown up a little bit as well with that. So, but I do think he might have found a network, and I think he would have been around. I think ECW would have lasted at least another maybe 3 or 4 years. That's just my take. I don't know how much longer after that, but
yeah.
Okay, this next one, Dave, I am so pumped about. This is definitely not an answer to a question. This is more like an episode topic. I think you're going to like this. I legitimately think you're going to like this. Guys, I want to give you a question or an conversation topic that fits what's airing this week, because this question was asked before Saturday night. With the return of Saturday night's main event to WWE, we go back to when the first iteration of it ended in 1992. Could you guys, meaning you and I, Dave, continue to book Saturday night's main event as if it was still going on from 1993 through the spring of 1995 when they moved to monthly pay-per-views and Saturday night's main event kind of wasn't needed anymore?
Oh, I like that.
I fucking love that, Dave.
Oh,
imagine you and I filling the gaps. Like, first off, imagine a Saturday night's main event, say, late February, early March, between the 93 Rumble and WrestleMania 9.
Oh. Well, you just... that, I mean, you've got all sorts of options there. You could have... look, I won't go... Yeah, you're building on a main event level. You've got probably, I think you'd be looking at something like Brett and Savage against, Yokozuna and, well, if you're keeping it main event level, Yokozuna and, maybe Razor, or maybe, Brett and Undertaker versus Yokozuna and Giant Gonzalez, or, that's probably not the greatest in-ring product, but, you want to step the gap between, they always did. The main event was always the gap between Rumble and Mania, and was normally around building the Mania main event. So you would have needed to have had Hart and Yoko involved, and maybe it's maybe it's a 6-man. Maybe it's Yokozuna and the Head Shrinkers versus Brett, Randy Savage, and Owen, or something like that. And Owen can get absolutely sliced and diced, and Brett's all destroyed. Who knows? But I think that'd be great. I think we could have some fun with that. Putting together a bunch of. I think that's a full episode one. That one. Yeah, I love that. I love that concept. I want to do that as a full episode. But yeah. I think I think I take it a step back. You're probably you're playing storylines. If they had the main event, I think you hold off. Number one, you hold off Perfect and Flair off of Raw. You put it on the main event. The retirement match goes on the main event.
Yeah. I also think I was gonna say, if you instead of putting it on Raw, I think you also, that's where you bring Hogan back. Instead of the Raw. If you're pumping up the whole Hogan.
Yeah, main event. Yep. You probably have.
If you're setting up Hogan and Beefcake against Money Inc., you bring Hogan back on national TV. Yes.
Yeah. And so they do the interview segment there. They would do the interview segment there where Hogan announces he's back. and maybe even get into Money Inc. run in and try to attack him. I think that's the opportunity. Maybe your tag team at the main event, it doesn't involve Yokozuna. Maybe you keep him separate. Maybe it's like Brett and Savage versus Razor Ramon and the Narcissist. So you get your first in-ring look at Luger, who we know they did the attack on Brett in the weeks leading in on the morning of the Rumble. On the morning of WrestleMania. So maybe you start to play into building Brett versus Luger at the main event. And then you have Yoko probably just squash someone of an upper level caliber player. You might have him, pull apart. Maybe that's where you do Tatanka's first televised loss is maybe to Yokozuna at the main event prior to WrestleMania.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
Yeah, I think that's sort of where I'd be seeing that main event. Or just off the cuff thinking, without any prep time.
Right. So yeah, we could. I mean, between WrestleMania and King of the Ring, you maybe do a contract signing with Hogan and Yoko, and then we get into '94. Holy crap, it'd be amazing. That's a great question, but we're not answering that tonight because that would take us way too long.
I think that I'll throw it out there. I think that could be a fun one to do between Royal Rumble and WrestleMania next year.
I think
February, March next year.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Excellent call, Dave. That might be a good March episode. Yeah, February, March episode. I agree 100%. Thank you for that one. I'm so pumped because we never thought about that. Because obviously by '95, then you don't even need Science Main Event because you have a pay-per-view every month. As a matter of fact, I've always been surprised that WCW kind of kept Clash of the Champions into '97 when they were doing monthly pay-per-views, in '94 almost, pretty much. So they kept Clash of the Champions going much longer than I ever thought they did, that they would have. But yeah, great question. Thank you. So great topic. Now that's a good call, Dave. I was thinking of that too. March should probably be, we could do either February or March, but that's a great, since, WrestleMania is all the way in the middle, almost the end of April. April next year will probably be our, whatever we decide to do for a WrestleMania themed show. But that's a good one. Thank you. Great one. I love that because it's amazing we never got into that kind of thing with Science Main Events. That's fantastic. This next one, I think is a half and half. I think half of it is a whole episode. The other half, I think we can answer immediately. We can answer tonight. So, guys, great show as always. Thank you. What if Steve Austin? See, this is the opposite of our John Cena retiring, Dave. What if Steve Austin was healthy out of WrestleMania 19 and stuck around as an active talent in 2003? Or, he says, or he's the one who came back in 2011 and feuded with John Cena over the next 2 years, or was the one instead of The Rock that was back between 2011 and 2013. The 2003 half, I think that's an episode topic, or I think that one is part of a future episode, because that one, the 2003 one, for me, we can get a little deep in the weeds on that one. My personal opinion.
Yeah.
Let's say, Dave, that let's plop Austin into the Rock spot. So let's say Austin's the one that comes back and he's the one that hosts WrestleMania 27 in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Does he cost Cena the world title? I don't think so. That's not an Austin thing, being vindictive like that for no reason.
No, not against one. Austin would stun them both.
Yeah.
Austin would jump in the ring and he'd stun the Miz as well.
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's stone cold. He hosting the event, he would probably be sick of the main event. He goes in, he stuns them both, and then tells the ref to count them both out. And you have a draw.
Yeah, no. Now, I think what would happen is Austin, this is my take. End of 2011, he says, I'm healthy, I'm feeling good, I've got some unfinished business in my career. I am going to put my name in the 2012 Royal Rumble. Austin wins the 2012 Royal Rumble, which would not piss anybody off because it's Stone Cold. And the only way people would get pissed off is if Daniel Bryan was a champion. I don't know if they'd work their way around that. But I think you have Austin win one of the two titles. Let him keep it the whole year. Maybe not wrestle every month, but be on TV a lot. Because unlike when The Rock was here, he was doing movies, so he wasn't here all the time. Yeah. You know, WrestleMania 28, Rock beats Cena, once in a lifetime, part 1. And we don't see him again until the end of December, and then he beats Punk for the belt at the 2013 Rumble. This is different. I think, this is what I do. You have Punk win the 2013 Rumble, and at WrestleMania 29 at MetLife, you have Punk versus Austin for the WWE title, and you have Cena against Taker.
Ooh,
that's where you finally pull the trigger on Cena Taker. Whoever you want to win is up to you, but that's what I think. This is if we don't get Rock at all. I think you do. Austin puts over Punk, strong, as strong as he could be, to be world champion, and you have Cena still in his aura against Taker. 2003 Austin, we're gonna have to chew on that because that goes a little more into the weeds. But this is what I would do between, if you plop Austin into the Rock spot between 2011 and 2013, I would adjust it a little bit, and that's what I would do.
Yeah, look, I think I'm a bit. I think if you're going to pluck Austin into the Rock spot in 2013, I think the match against Cena still happens. I think you bring him back. So let's take it back. I think
sure.
Let's take it back to 2012. Let's just see if I can play this out a little. Let's see if I can come up with something that works. So 2012, Stone Cold is the host of the event. And I think at some point, he comes out, he does an opening promo, everyone's happy to see him. We get a couple of backstage segments. I think one of the backstage segments would be Miz getting in his face. Miz talking about how he's the A-lister, he's the top guy now, and he's surpassed Stone Cold, and Stone Cold, Miz probably walks off and Stone Cold gives that look at him like, who the hell do you think you are? And I think another one is he's walking down the corridor and he bumps into Cena, and Cena, he tries to do one of his rap put downs. Right. He's trying to be funny, he's trying to be Cena, and it's clear that he's irked. Austin, feels he's been disrespected. Then we get to our main event. I think, both guys are down. Ref goes down. Cena and Miz battle a little bit more with the ref down. They both have pin attempts against each other. Second ref comes down. He gets taken out as well. And so now Austin comes down as the host of the night. And Austin checks on both referees and they're not going in. And while this is going on, maybe Miz gets another shot. He does a skull crashing finale on Cena, goes for the cover. There's no one to count. Miz gets up. He starts yelling at Austin, gets in Austin's face. Austin is not happy. Miz shoves Austin. That's the catalyst. Bam, Stone Cold Stunner. He drops him. At this point, Cena's on his feet. Austin turns and looks at Cena and drops him with a stunner as well. And the crowd go absolutely wild at this point. I think, he might even maybe he does drag Miz over for a cover. But I think, you could even just see Austin pushing both guys to the floor, picking a ref up and telling the ref to count. And we get a double count out. Miz keeps the title, or maybe whatever. Miz keeps the title. Cena on the next night can talk about how he would have won the title if it wasn't for Austin. But, he respects Austin. If it was just a misunderstanding, he invites Austin out to bury the hatchet. Like, Austin comes out, I don't believe in burying the hatchet, Listen to me, son, if you opened your mouth, you disrespected me, you got what you deserved. I don't need to bury the hatchet. But if you keep running your mouth, I'm going to drop you again. And Cena, Austin turns to leave and Cena says something. And Austin turns and stuns him again. And the crowd go wild. And that's it. And Austin walks off. And maybe earlier in the night, Austin has said, look, he's in interviews, I'm feeling better. And, whoever's your backstage interviewer, would we ever see Stone Cold in the ring again? You never know. Never say never. Then we get to later in the year and Austin announces he feels he's gonna put his hand up. He wants to be WrestleMania next year. He never, he didn't get the send off. He's looking at coming back. Cena interrupts him. You ruined my WrestleMania moment. Maybe Cena comes out and drops him with an F. What are they? Drops him, puts him down with the with his finisher, and it's he looks at him and says, "You were my WrestleMania moment. I'm going to ruin yours." And of course, you're set to line. Austin and Cena are heading to WrestleMania. Now the crowd are going to be just like they were with Rock. They're going to be behind Austin. So I think building to Mania, you're once in a lifetime, Austin and Cena, and Austin wins. All right? Wins clean in the middle of the ring, but after the match, actually shakes John Cena's hand, gets him up, shakes his hand, and then drops him with another stunner, because that's what Austin's like.
Exactly.
Punk and, the titles are all set, and then I think you get the Austin's fit and healthy. So what does he do, coming out? I don't think you have him at every month to start with. I think if he's well enough to go, you're going to hold him off till SummerSlam. SummerSlam's going to be the next big appearance, and maybe you need to put him with, at SummerSlam. I think you're looking at, would it be a Chris Jericho? Would it be a Triple H? He has a match against someone that can do a little bit more of the work in ring. So Austin, if Austin is still, his timing's going to be out. He doesn't have his in-ring working shoes on completely yet. But maybe someone like a Jericho or whatever, he gets the win there. And at this point, you could have Punk start to mouth off about Austin at different points. Austin, what are you doing here? Austin, I'm the champ. It's been about me. And so you have that moment, you want to turn Punk heel, and you have that moment where Punk attacks Austin on Raw, turning himself heel and allowing you to start to build. And I think the build is you build to Punk Austin at WrestleMania. And to do that, Austin wins the Rumble. Austin declares he's coming back. He's going into the Rumble. He wants a shot. Punk, I'm coming for you. Because maybe Punk's like, you haven't been around long enough. I'm not giving you a title shot. You haven't been around long enough. You don't deserve one. Go and win the Rumble or something. So Austin does. Wins the Rumble. He takes his shot. Mm-hmm. And I don't think Punk would have any problem laying down for Austin at WrestleMania. After his 14, 15-month title reign, I could see Punk willing to put Austin over at WrestleMania. They put him over. Austin wins the belt at WrestleMania, and they rematch at SummerSlam. Well, then you're going one of two lines. You are either rematching with Punk at SummerSlam and putting the belt back on Punk, or Brock comes in and you get the Brock Austin match that you never got.
Exactly. I think that happens eventually.
And Brock returns, and Austin, you got the build, 3-month build. Austin doesn't have, he might defend the title, a rematch against Punk, maybe a match against, Kane, because everyone faced Kane, whoever it is. But I think you build to, there it is. Backlash is Brock returns and Brock faces Cena, and Punk gets his rematch, and Punk loses and Brock beats Cena easy, comfortably. Maybe it's the five suplexes, and Suplex City is opens its doors, and it's a pretty easy victory. Mm-hmm. And then you build, you get the match. You ducked me in 2002. You ducked me. Stone Cold. I never ducked anyone, and I'll face you at SummerSlam, put the belt on the line, let's go. You've got a good 2-3 month build, and then Austin puts Brock over, and Austin rides off into the sunset. He doesn't need to appear the next night, just Austin puts him over clean, and Brock begins his big run, and Austin gets that last hurrah.
That's awesome. I approve. I approve of both our theories, because I think Austin in 2011, 12, 13 would be actually pretty cool. And I don't think Punk would be as pissed off to put Austin over as he did having to put Rock over and then never get anything out of it. So, yeah, I think so.
I think if Punk was the main event, that's what I'm saying. I think if it was Punk Austin for the title at WrestleMania, I think what ticked Punk off the most was he was pushed out of that main event slot. After all that time, he felt that it should have been him and The Rock, not Cena and Rock for the second time. And I think if you are highlighting that Punk is facing Austin, knowing that it's going to be the main event, I think Punk would be all for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. And as for Austin 2003, we may have to piggyback that as part of an episode on something else, because that's a whole thing. Because I think Austin active in 2003 I think he'd be on Raw, and it would make Raw a much better show than it ended up actually being. So, yes. And I think the one thing I'll tease is I do think we finally get a good Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels match. That's just me, though. I think we should, you know what? I think we're good. I think we'll stop here. I think we had a good, we still got a few left. We'll put them in the bullpen. We got a few left, and we'll put them on for our next mailbag episode, which will probably be, sometime probably May or June. We usually do mailbags twice a year, usually beginning of the summer and usually middle of winter. So, thank you everyone for your questions. Greatly appreciated. If you have more, think of them. And for the one who gave me the Saturday main event topic, that's awesome. We need those too. We just don't need our mailbag questions. We would love episode topics, because Dave and I are pretty smart, but sometimes it's okay for the well to run a little dry once in a while. We'd love your input. We'd love for you to come up with something. So we are definitely going to do that Saturday night's main event episode at some time early in 2025. So great idea on that one. Dave, that was a lot of fun. We usually don't fly off the cuff. Only a couple times a year do we fly off the cuff. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It
was good. Some really enjoyable questions there, and hopefully our rabbit holes are satisfactory.
Yes.
As always, we know everyone who listens, you're probably sitting there going, I do this and I do that, and that's what makes it fun, because we all do it. But hopefully you've enjoyed the ideas that have been put forward, and that's all we want to do is just help open up thought processes. So no, it's been good. Exactly. There are some good questions there.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. That'll do it for the final episode of Through the Looking Glass for 2024. Thank you for listening, everybody. Dave, we know where to. I always ask, but you know where to find us. We float around the Facebook pages. I'm on Twitter, of course. So is the page. So is the podcast page. We got great stuff coming in the new year, both here on the PTB Wrestling Network, as well as, of course, the North-South Connection, the Backbone Wrestling, all the great stuff. Jenny Position within the No. So you see some great stuff coming up. We'll have the final episode of Wrestle Tracks for the end of the year. Also input by you, the listeners. Dave, Greg Diener, and I will pick a show that you picked. So we'll do that at the end of the year as well. Dave, always a pleasure. Merry Christmas to you, sir, and a Happy New Year. Merry Christmas to all of you, or Happy Hanukkah to all of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Merry Christmas to everyone from all the way down under. I hope that your Christmas is a lot cooler than mine will be.
But not as freezing as mine probably will be. So anyway, enjoy, everybody. Have fun. We hope you enjoyed the many rabbit hole drops this month, and we will see you in 2025 through the looking glass.